This fragment is the face of a portrait, and it depicts an adolescent who was known as Antinous. What is preserved here is most of the face and a large part of the head. We're largely missing part of the nose, part of the jaw, part of the left side of the head. The portraits of Antinous are very recognizable for this very distinctive curly hairstyle. He has this very smooth, unlined face, these very rounded cheeks, these very deep-set eyes. Antinous is a character that we don't actually have a lot written about him, but what we do know about his background is that he was born in Bithynia. He, at some point in time in his youth, joined the entourage of the Emperor Hadrian, who reigned from 117 to 138. And Antinous, one of the most important things about him is that he was allegedly Hadrian's lover. During Antinous' travels with Hadrian, they were traveling in the province of Egypt, and they were on the Nile River, and Antinous drowned. He died in the year 130. He was about 20 years old at the time. And this is where Antinous' fame really begins. Hadrian decides to make Antinous a god, so he deifies him. He completely bypasses the Senate. Normally they would need to approve this. So he mandates religious rites for Antinous. And then Hadrian creates a city named Antinopolis where Antinous died. Deifying someone, creating a cult around them, and also creating a city in their honor is certainly not something you do for just anyone. This cult spread very rapidly, and it spread very quickly throughout various parts of the empire. His image was everywhere. It was on lamps, on gems, on silverware, colossal large-scale sculptures for shrines and temples, smaller-scale busts and statuettes for private devotion. The Roman historian Cassius Dio actually said that you could find his images throughout the entire Roman Empire. When the portrait was purchased in 1898 by the museum's first president, Charles Hutchinson, it was in the form of a relief. It was on a marble panel, and it had a restored nose and a neck in plaster. In 1913, Art Institute curator Frank Tarbell published this piece. He questioned this form of it, suggested that it did not originally belong to relief, but that it actually belonged to a larger bust or statue. And so already in 1913, we have this question of the form that this portrait originally took. The most recent investigation that we've been on for roughly the last 10 years or so was spurred in large part by an observation by a colleague of ours, Egyptologist W. Raymond Johnson, who in 2005, while in Rome, noticed at a museum there, the Palazzo Altemps, that they had a bust that had a modern face on it, and modern meaning perhaps 17th or 18th century. But the back of it, and then part of the chest, was ancient. And in looking at the join of this head, he questioned, does the Chicago portrait match with the back of the head and the remaining bust in Rome? Do these two pieces actually go together? In consulting with a number of other colleagues, initially there was a certain amount of skepticism. A key member of the team has been Jerry Padani, former senior conservator of antiquities at the J. Paul Getty Museum.
I must say, I was really skeptical that you would have this well-known portrait of Antinous in the collection in Rome at Palazzo Altemps, and then the fragment of the head that was missing in Chicago. Not impossible, just highly improbable. The more I looked at the photographs of the shape of the break on the ancient bust, and the more I looked at the fragment, the less likely it seemed that the fracture could mimic itself so accurately. So we paid a visit to Rome.
Jerry helped facilitate our work with our Italian colleagues in this process. He had suggested that we make a cast of the Art Institute's portrait of Antinous. Upon bringing the cast to Rome and seeing it side by side with the portrait, there was certainly a eureka moment.
As close as the break shape was, The biggest question was whether or not they actually belong, because there are so many portraits of Antinous that have survived, and they are so similar. Are we pursuing something that we want to believe rather than something that actually exists?
So in order to pursue this question further, digital scans were taken of both the Chicago cast and the Altemps bust, after which the modern head on the Altemps bust was digitally removed and the Chicago head was digitally attached. From this point, 3D prints were made, both of the cast of the Chicago piece and the Altemps bust with the removed head. They were attached with modeling clay to move the head around to get the alignment correct. There was still very much a gap in the area specifically of the left side of the jaw. This might be not only due to the fragmentation of the sculpture when it broke, but also the fact that when the Altemps piece was restored, the sculptor likely had to cut back a certain amount of material to attach the new restored piece.
You can't just do this digitally. You have to have in your hand a three-dimensional object to see if there really is a match. And that gap that exists between the fragment and the portrait bust has to be completed in a way where you're not forcing the completion of the shape. If a curl continued from the fragment to the head, then it was important that it flowed naturally. This team had to remain very objective. They did an extraordinary job, and it was clear that the fragment did in fact belong.
This whole process has involved so many different individuals and so many different forms of investigation. It's this wonderful blend of the new and the traditional that is continuing to allow us to really enhance the way we approach these questions, and also to bring these objects to life in really new and exciting ways.
I think visitors should understand that antiquities collections aren't dead collections. There's new discoveries, new pieces of knowledge that are uncovered every day within the museum, just like at the archaeological site.